Wow! Sheena Ren, a fourth-year university student, is enjoying a short break before starting his job search. He's loved swords and magic since he was a child and is willing to stay up all night just to finish a story with such a theme. He has just finished playing the newly released game, titled The Legend of the Seven Heroes, Part 2 in the popular RPG series. This is the familiar story of the children of the heroes who once defeated the Demon King. In Part 2, the protagonist's best friend kills another friend, a saint, and this unexpected act causes chaos in the kingdom. The king orders the protagonist to kill that friend. The story will continue in Part 3. Ren read the ending of the game, checking to see if anyone else had finished. He discovered that the protagonist's friend was actually the mastermind from beginning to end. He didn't really mind anyway, just thinking about playing again to discover some hidden skill. But before he could restart, a notification appeared asking if he wanted to begin a special story with the ability to summon a demonic sword. Ren couldn't remember which character had that skill.
But he didn't care. He pressed yes.
And then he was stunned when he was surrounded by blinding light. When he woke up, he saw the face of a strange, elderly woman. The woman is talking to another woman. Ren realized he had transmigrated into the game and become one of its characters. At first, he couldn't believe it. But the fact that his body couldn't move or see clearly proved that he was now an infant. Could this be the specific story that the game was referring to? Before he could think any further, the older woman picked him up and asked the person he guessed was his mother about his name. The young woman picked him up, smiled, and said she would name him Len Ashton. Ren burst into tears. That name he could never forget. It was the reason behind all the chaos in the game. Len Ashton, the protagonist's former best friend, betrayed him. Ren couldn't believe that he would now have to live under the name of one of the suspected masterminds behind everything in the game. Although his name and Len Ashton sound very similar, Ren didn't believe he had anything in common with that character. Time flies by. 7 years have passed since he transmigrated. Ren, now Len Ashton, is busy practicing swordsmanship with his father. The older man quickly threw the boy to the ground. His father warned him not to reveal any weaknesses to the enemy. Even though he was lying flat on the ground, Len was still praised by his father for his agility, especially for a 7-year-old child. Even so, young Len was almost completely exhausted after the training session. It was springtime in their small village. An unnamed village in the Leomel Empire, a militaristic nation located in the western part of the Elfin continent, was bathed in a warm atmosphere. Looking back, Len still finds it hard to accept what happened to him, especially the prospect of having to start over as a newborn baby. But it was precisely because he was reborn in this way that he easily adapted, comfortably immersing himself in eating and sleeping whenever his mother sang him to sleep. What nobody knows, Len not only retained his memories, and he even has the ability to see everyone's status screen. However, he couldn't see his own status screen, unlike in the game. However, what concerned him most was the skill of summoning demonic swords. It's true that the game has some hidden skills, and even on the second turn, players can combine some existing skills to create a new one. Of course, there are also unique skills available only to a select few. But as far as he could remember, there was absolutely no skill called summoning a demonic sword. In your case, Len can actually summon the magic sword, even though it's still quite small at the moment. According to the inscription on his bracelet, his ability to summon a demonic sword will develop as he matures. Additionally, he will be able to use minor natural magic attacks. This skill also allows him to increase the number of types of magic swords he can summon. He now possesses a magic sword with wood attributes. However, Len also had to train his magic carefully. If he trained too much, he would deplete his magical energy and suffer from severe headaches. Len had been secretly practicing his demon sword, summoning skills alone, just like now, until his father suddenly burst into the room to hug him. The fact that he possesses this power only further confirms that this world is intimately connected to the game. That also means he has to do everything he can to avoid the bleak future he knows he'll face. That's why Len decided to start practicing magic at an early age. He did it both to protect himself and to learn more about this world. Len lived a peaceful life, helping his parents on their small farm. When he was 7 years old, his father suggested he begin practicing swordsmanship with a wooden sword. During the first training session, Len was the one who struck first, but his father easily dismissed the idea. Even though he was still just a child, Len was surprised to realize his current body. He possesses incredible strength. However, that strength was still not enough for him to defeat his father. Len only lasted less than 10 minutes in the match. Nevertheless, his father praised him and said they would continue when he regained his strength. As soon as his father passed away, Len checked his notifications, and he found that his skills had improved thanks to using a wood attribute magic sword. From then on, he continued his daily routine, studying theory in the morning and practicing swordsmanship in the afternoon. Unlike in the game, Len cannot easily level up by collecting magic stones from flying monsters. His father had given him a magic stone when he was a child. But since he didn't hunt it himself, his skills and status notifications didn't react at all. They continued training. And so another month passed. Len's father noticed that the boy had improved a lot in a short period of time, but he also pointed out that you need to improve your balance. Then his father threw him to the ground to illustrate his point. Although he wanted to practice more, his father advised him to rest and reminded him that just consistent effort each day will be enough. He smiled, said that Len would do very well, and left. As soon as my father left, Len immediately checked his status. He realized that his demon sword summoning skill was only a little bit away from leveling up. Unlike in games, leveling up in this world is much harder. His skills only increase by about 2 points each day. Despite being tired, Len began to enjoy life. Because things are getting more and more interesting, that night, Len's mother commented on the blisters and calluses on his hands. She said that perhaps Len's father was putting too much pressure on him. Len reassured his mother that he wanted to do it, then asked her if she hated swords. She replied that she was afraid of swords, and she recalled the last time her husband was fascinated by swordsmanship. When he was young, he not only protected her from many monsters, but she couldn't help but worry whether his courage might become a curse. What if he were injured because of it? Just thinking about it made her uneasy, but she also understood that his power was no joke. Len continued to hunt many monsters, bringing in a steady income. The monster meat could also be shared with the villagers, benefiting everyone. At that moment, Len's father came in and reassured his mother not to worry, because he was very strong. He promised not to let the monster defeat him in the village, and unlike before, he was no longer so careless. He said that family is his top priority. When Len lay down in bed that night, he couldn't help but think about his family. In his previous life, his parents divorced. He lives with his mother. As time went on, their conversations became shorter and shorter, until finally they stopped speaking to each other altogether. His mother never came home either. Len felt grateful that she was able to go to university, and he tried to understand that his mother had also gone through her own difficulties during that time. When 3 people lived together, everything was very peaceful, with Len doing the housework and practice daily. Compared to my previous life, Len's current life is completely different, but he feels fulfilled. One day after training, Len lost to his father again in the match. His father suggested they rest and continue tomorrow. When I stood up, Len sensed something was different. His body suddenly felt light, and he quickly assumed a fighting stance. He rushed towards his father. The father managed to stop him in time, but he was surprised and couldn't understand how Len was so fast. Not only that, his strength has also increased significantly compared to before. Len continued to attack his father. He realized that his speed and strength were increasing, leaving his father with no choice but to defend himself against his blows. Len will probably continue, if it weren't for the father's broken sword. Finally, the father realized what was happening. He hugged Len close and realized that my son is a skilled person. Then his mother, Milieu, walked in and curiously asked what was going on, and it was then that his father explained it to her. Len also realized that the next level of his physical abilities had been activated, but more importantly, His father was now even more determined to take him to the capital to make a name for himself as a knight. His parents are now very excited about this new discovery and even want to go to church to test his skills if they have enough money. Len wasn't very enthusiastic about the idea, saying that as long as his skill didn't kill him, it didn't matter what his skill was. When they heard him say that, his parents could only frown at him. Surely children are usually thrilled to discover a new skill like that. But Len remained adamant about not wanting to go through this. Who would have ever heard of the skill of summoning a demonic sword? He'd rather stay away from such trouble. And if possible, he would just like to live a peaceful life in the village. If there's one thing Len wants to do, it's to become his father's successor in the village, so they can hunt monsters together. If their income increases, they can help the village prosper. Not only that, if the situation worsens, Len can also protect his father. This surprised his mother greatly. For the past 7 years, Len has lived the happiest life he's ever had, and it was all thanks to his parents. Deep down, Len knew he was no longer living as Sheena Wren. But now it's Len Ashton. That's why he wants his parents to live a long life together. Both his parents were touched by his words and ended the conversation with a hug. For Len, this was his second time playing. Therefore, he resolved to cherish everything in order to prevent a future filled with despair. You will live a different life than Len in the game. But he never expected that his dream would be shattered in the next few years, because in the future, he will meet the girl he should never have met, the very girl he was supposed to kill. In the northern city of Clausel, a beautiful young woman sat alone in the garden, sighing heavily. Vios, the leader of the night patrol team, approached her and asked if anything was wrong. The girl replied that she felt bored with practicing. The old knight's eyes rested on the men who had fallen before him. The old knight remarked that even his soldiers were no longer enough to serve as sparring partners for her. At this point, the girl realized something more important that Vios had done, because she noticed the armor he was wearing. He replied that he had been ordered to patrol the northwestern part of the territory, and he needed to eliminate a troublesome monster. Back in Len's village, life was as peaceful as ever. Len realized that 3 years had passed since he leveled up, as he had now reached level 2. Now, Len can see the benefits of level 3, but the next level is still a long way off, especially since he only has 659 points, while he needs 15 more points to level up. The truth is, there were days when he couldn't practice swordsmanship because he had to help in the fields, especially as winter approached. He had only just discovered that practicing for a short period of time would slightly reduce his score. But with his current score, it's enough to give him the strength to fight and live peacefully in his small village. One of the village elders greeted Len, speaking of how his father always boasted about him, and that he would one day become one of the great knights of the capital. Speaking of the capital, a group of knights suddenly appeared. The elderly woman told Len they should go home. These knights belonged to Lord Baron's men. They headed straight to Ashton's house, where Vios had spoken with his father, holding a letter in his hand. The Vios apologized for the unexpected appearance, and Len's father asked what they were doing in the suburbs. Len knew that the Lord was the ruler of their territory, and all knights had to report to higher-ranking nobles. His father was one of the knights assigned to protect the village. Throughout his time in this world, this was the first time Len had seen a knight in armor. Len's father read the letter with a frown, asking Vios if the monster had actually caused any damage in the area. The elderly knight confirmed, adding that several villages had been attacked and there were casualties according to witnesses. The monster was a small creature that moved as fast as the wind. Therefore, Vios and his team patrolled the area, looking for opportunities to eliminate the monster. However, they had not yet had any luck. Vios suggested that Len's father join the vigilance team. Father Len only asked what rank this monster belonged to. Vios is speculated to be at least a D segment car. In terms of ranking, the organization created a monster ranking system based on their level of danger, with S being the highest rank and G being the lowest. If the monster lurking around the village is a D rank monster, then it's equivalent to a boss in the early stages of the game. Despite the large number of knights, the monster remained undefeated. But back to the main point, Len's father asked why such a mid-level monster was appearing in this area, when only F-level monsters usually appeared in their territory. Vios didn't know the reason either, so they planned to recruit some more knights from a nearby village to enhance security. However, because the patrol area is so vast, it will take approximately 20 days for reinforcements to arrive. The elderly knight apologized for the inconvenience, and he asked Len's father to patiently wait until then. Given the current situation, Len's father had no choice but to accept the assignment. While they were busy discussing, Len listened attentively and wondered what the monster's name was. If he knew its name, perhaps he would have some understanding of it, based on his memories from the game. Vios and Len's father finally finished their conversation. Upon noticing Len's question, Vios confirmed that he was indeed his son. Len's father immediately told him to greet the captain of the knights. Vios and his team stayed a short while, enjoying the Ashton family's hospitality before departing that day. As the knights left, they couldn't help but comment on how the 10-year-old boy, Len, was the same age as their young mistress. And they were also very curious about him because Len possessed exceptional skills. If it were Vios, he would have wanted to test Len's swordsmanship right there at Ashton's house. Len's father said they would be busy from now on. But when Len wanted to see the letter from Vios, his father told him not to worry. He would hunt the D-class monster himself. Actually, he had hunted it a year before, even before Len was born. Len was surprised to hear that, but it also explained why he always lost to his father in fencing practice. Since then, Father Len never stopped hunting. He brought back a large haul of wild boars. He planned to increase the number he hunted each day because wild boars were a popular hunting target. Even among other monsters, Len understood his father's plan. The father wanted to reduce the number of prey animals so that wild monsters wouldn't come near their area. And this would also make it easier for the soldiers to track the monsters thanks to the fewer footprints and animal droppings. Len's father continued hunting, but unlike before, when he only hunted in the mornings, he now begins hunting in the late afternoon, until sunset. One night, while they were bathing together, Len noticed bruises on his father's body. He said that perhaps his father had been working too hard. Len asked his father if he could help him hunt, but his father said he could do so after the matter with the monster was resolved. Len's father also apologized for not being able to train with him, but Len didn't mind because he was busy helping his mother take care of the wild boars his father had hunted. Although his father seemed calm about it, Len couldn't help but worry, as he didn't want anything to happen that would disrupt his peaceful life. Life goes on as usual. Until the 10th day, when something else happened. Len realized that his father hadn't returned yet, so his mother suggested going to find him. Len offered to go along, but his mother objected, saying it was too dangerous. Hearing this, Len couldn't restrain himself and spoke up, pointing out that it would be more dangerous for his mother to go alone, and that he would go no matter how much she tried to stop him. Seeing her mother's frightened expression, Len recalled a conversation from a few years ago about her mother's worries regarding her father's safety. Finally, the mother and daughter decided to set off to find their father. They walked on until they reached the bridge leading into the forest. A river separates the forest from their village. As they began to cross the bridge, Len felt his eyes gradually adjust to the darkness. And not long after, they discovered their father sitting by the tree near the other end of the bridge. They were overjoyed to see him. But I also felt something was wrong. Len's mother rushed to his side. Len had no choice but to follow behind. And that's when they saw Len's father, severely injured. He was bleeding profusely. The bright moonlight shone all around. Len and his mother were worried and taking care of his father. Suddenly, he heard a noise nearby. This made him turn around and look. Suddenly, a wild boar appeared out of nowhere. The wild boar charged straight towards Len. He managed to stop the wild boar in time with his sword, and he struggled with the beast that was pinning him down, until his mother hit the pig. Just then, Len saw movement from behind. 2 other wild boars were approaching them. Len was surprised to discover that he could repel them. They realized that it was a result of the promotion. He quickly pushed the pig away, and he lunged toward the third child. When the third wild boar aimed straight at his mother, Len slashed the wild boar with his sword, and he was surprised that it was destroyed with just one slash. When he slaughtered the remaining pig, the third animal stopped attacking, but the wild boar ran away, all Len could think of. I was stronger by then, thanks to all the training sessions with my father. Len and his mother hurried their father home, spending the entire night with Mrs. Rigg treating his wounds. The old woman told them that Len's father was still in an unstable condition, but at least his injuries were temporarily under control. His mother thanked both of them, especially Len. He insisted on going out with her last night. As for Len, he still couldn't stop thinking, because it was impossible for his father to be defeated by those weak, wild boars. This means that his father encountered a dangerous monster, which he didn't want. If so, the monster is still in the forest, and it will take another 10 days for reinforcements to arrive. Len couldn't help but think about the worst-case scenario. The monster invaded the village and attacked them. With that in mind, he began to look for ways he could do to help. Len immediately decided to return to the forest. He saw the monsters he had killed last night. Luckily, they weren't eaten by other animals, so Len thought maybe he should bring them home before the others arrived. Suddenly, torch-like lights shot out from the corpses of the monsters, and the torch-like lights were drawn into his bracelet. It increases the monster summoning skill. And get the wooden monster 2 points. This confirms Len's initial thought. The bracelet only absorbs the monster stones from the monster's body if you are the one hunting them. Len brought the wild boar's carcass home with plans for that night. He told his mother that he would take over his father's job of protecting the village. Before his mother could even speak, Len had said beforehand that he understood the danger, but as long as you're a member of the Ashton family, protecting the village is also your responsibility. His mother objected, saying he was still a child, but Len replied that he was the only one in the village who could fight against the monster. When his father was injured, that's why he asked his mother for permission to protect everyone. At least until reinforcements arrive, his mother understood that there was no arguing with Len. So that night, she stayed up late sitting beside his father. The next morning, she agreed to let Len go, but on the condition that he return before dark. If you get lost, his mother told him to use Tsurugi Rock, a large tower-like rock in the forest, as a landmark. Following my mother's instructions, Len has found Tsurugi Rock, and recall the power of the wooden sword and its natural magical properties. He recalled a powerful boss in the game that could use natural magic. As if sensing Len's intention, he was immediately put to the test to demonstrate that ability. A wild boar suddenly appeared, and the wild boar charged straight toward him. Len calmly pointed his sword at the monster. He recited a spell that enveloped the pig in magic, then vines wrapped around it, leaving it hanging suspended in midair. However, witnessing the monster struggling, this made it impossible for Len to defeat it immediately. Finally, he decided to end the battle with a fatal blow, finishing off the pig. Len couldn't believe that natural magic was so easy to use. And he was able to practice a lot that day by taking down an entire herd of wild boars. The villagers were very surprised to see him, young Len dragging his spoils, which included 12 pigs. The next day, he hunted down 12 more. And by the third day, the number of wild boars he had hunted had increased. The same was true on Wednesday and Thursday. The number of hunted animals increased each day. However, he still hadn't encountered the monster he was looking for. Looking at his notification, Len realized he only needed to hunt 3 more pigs. He was more excited than ever that he would be able to upgrade his demon sword of metal skill soon. That evening, Len returned home, and he saw that Mrs. Rigg was worried. She asked his mother to wait outside. Because Len's father was in a bad state, Len rushed to Rigg's side and asked what had happened. She explained that his father's condition had worsened at dusk. What's worse is that they used up all the precious herbs they had, leaving him with only a faint breath of life. They couldn't understand why this happened, and tonight is the last time. Herbal remedies can be used, At that time, Mrs. Rigg asked Milieu to bring the recipe box to her house, telling her to ask her husband about how to help. Milieu hurried outside. Len then asked Mrs. Rigg if there was anything he could do and about herbs. With a sorrowful expression, Mrs. Rigg explained that these herbs used to grow around the foot of Mount Tsurugi, but they became extinct after the harsh winter a few decades ago. Len saw a 5-pointed leaf on the table. He asked if it was herbal medicine, and Mrs. Rigg confirmed it and told him to wait outside the door because she needed to take care of his father. Len stepped outside and realized that's rondo grass, one of the medicinal herbs he used in the game. But has this herb truly become extinct? Len couldn't believe his eyes until he saw it with his own. He knew very well that the forest was very dangerous at night, but if you don't do anything now, your father will die. Finally, Len dashed into the forest. Ignoring all the strange shadows, run straight towards Tsurugi Rock. Upon arrival, he immediately searched for rondo grass around him. But I couldn't find it. Len didn't give up, wondering if there was still grass at the top. He began climbing to the mountaintop, thanks to the magic of nature. After a long time, he finally reached the summit, and before him lay a field of rondo grass. Len hurriedly pulled up as many leaves as he could, stuffing them into a bag in the hope that these herbs would save his father. Just then, he spotted bones on the ground, wild boar bones. He wondered how they got there, so high up. But looking closely, he realized there weren't just pig bones, but also some pieces of jewelry. It sent shivers down his spine. Len quickly rushed down, feeling uneasy about the place. He started running home. But suddenly they encountered 3 wild boars. Even the monsters were startled by his appearance. But Len quickly eliminated them in just 3 sword strokes. At that moment, he realized something was wrong. The wild boars seemed afraid of something, as if they were trying to run away. Len sensed a presence behind him, and when he turned around to look, he saw the familiar silhouette of the monster, which he wanted to avoid. That's a special D-class monster, Chief Wolven. The colossal monster rose above everything, letting out a deafening roar. Chief Wolven was a powerful monster, ranking at the top of the D-class monsters. Instead of waiting for it to attack, Len decided to run away. He turned around just in time to avoid the monster's jaws. Len landed on a nearby tree trunk, but even the monster quickly sank its teeth into it. Len only managed to dodge the bite from its breath. He admitted to himself that this wolf was much more agile than him. But that wasn't the worst part. Chief Wolven was also known for his ability to use wind magic thanks to his multiple tails. The monster attacked Len using wind magic. Fortunately, Len's quick reflexes saved him by a hair's breadth. Chief Wolven uses the wind energy accumulated from his body to create invisible hands, using them to steal objects. In addition to the wind magic attack just now, Len knew perfectly well that this monster was far too powerful for him to handle. However, he also realized that it would never let him escape. At this point, his only option was to find a way to take it down right here. Currently, the offensive power of his natural magic is low, and there's no way for him to get close enough to the monster's belly to inflict damage. But then he noticed a wound on one of the monster's 4 legs. Len suddenly realized that this wound might have been inflicted by his father. This also explains why his father was able to escape the monster the last time. He thought that perhaps the reason the monster hadn't attacked him yet was because it was still injured. Len's father had fulfilled his role as a knight, and Len was determined to follow through. Suddenly, the atmosphere became stifling. When Chief Wolven unleashed a new wind attack, Len stayed calm, and he used natural magic to block the attack. It created a buffer zone between him and the monster. He also uses magic to restrain the monster, even if only for a brief moment, before he charged straight into it and delivered a direct blow to Chief Wolven. Unfortunately, his wooden demon sword shattered, instead of inflicting damage on the monster. This is terrible. Will he have enough time to summon the sword back? Len stepped back and tried to summon the sword, but as soon as I did that, he felt a terrible headache. Summoning the sword was consuming too much mana, Or perhaps it was because he was trying to summon it even though the sword was broken. This moment of confusion was the opportunity Chief Wolven needed. The monster immediately pounced on Len, sinking its teeth into him. Nevertheless, Len took advantage of the opportunity. He struck the monster's wound as it lunged at him. This caused it to throw him off, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. Angered, Len uses natural magic. To create a fragile shield between himself and the monster, Len constructed a cave from tree trunks and vines, the place where the monster relentlessly gnaws away. Inside the cave, Len examined his wounds and realized he could faint at any moment, because they were so severe. Just then, he remembered he still had rondo grass with him, but the image of his father came to mind. This led him to decide against using it, fearing it wouldn't be enough to save his father. When Chief Wolven approached, Len wondered if there were any other weapons that could be used against it. It was then that he saw his bracelet. Meanwhile, the monster had grown utterly bored with trying to bite its way into the cave. It decided to use a wind attack. The strong winds forced Len to leave the cave, but he quickly regained his balance and ran towards Tsurugi Rock. Consider it a signpost. Chief Wolven was preparing to chase after him, but Len used his natural magic to restrain the monster a little. With mana nearly depleted, Len hurried over to the carcasses of the 3 wild boars he had hunted earlier. He remembered that he only needed 3 more to unlock the magical metal sword. Chief Wolven managed to break through the vines, and Chief Wolven chased after Len. In a last-ditch effort to stop the monster, Len threw his broken sword at it. The monster easily dodged, but as soon as it did so, vines unexpectedly shot up from the sword, wrapped Chief Wolven up tightly once more. Len hastily absorbed the monster stones from the wild boars, determined not to lose. With one last effort, Len summoned the magical metal sword. Just in time, as Chief Wolven was about to bite him in the head, Len plunged his sword into the monster's head. Launch an attack pierced through Chief Wolven's skull. The monster collapsed to the ground, covered in blood, and died instantly. Len finally got to admire the new sword he had summoned, the magical metal sword. However, immediately after the victory, Len felt exhausted. He slipped and fell right next to the monster's corpse, when his bracelet began to absorb the monster stone. Despite winning, Len knew he was in a dangerous situation, when his body could no longer move. He clutched the bag tightly to his chest, thinking about his mother and father. Len could barely hear the sound of the horse's hooves and shouts from afar when a group of people appeared from the horizon. Before losing consciousness, he realized that reinforcements had arrived just in time. They took Len home. They knocked on Ashton's door and introduced themselves as knights from Clausel. One of them was carrying Len in his arms, while the other person gave it to his mother. The bag contains rondo grass. Meanwhile, at Clausel, one of the knights reported to Vios that Len Ashton had single-handedly defeated Chief Wolven. This was overheard by a young girl. She was extremely excited to learn that a young boy in their territory single-handedly defeated a D-rank monster. 2 months later, Len has fully recovered and is spending his time leisurely atop Tsurugi Rock in the forest. He was admiring Bandit's magical sword, which looked more like a pair of finger guards than a sword. To be honest, Len didn't expect to receive a new magical sword after defeating Chief Wolven. He put it away and went downstairs. Just then, a knight was waiting at the foot of the mountain. He anxiously reminded Len that he should inform them whenever he wanted to enter the forest so they could escort him. On the way home, Len thanked them for arriving in time. The knight was pleased to hear this, making the rush worthwhile. However, they were still surprised that Len had been able to defeat the monster alone. At this point, the knight, out of curiosity, asked if Len's bag contained the treasure that Chief Wolven had hidden, and Len confirmed it. Len told him that he wanted to sell the treasure to raise money to help the village. The knight said that the reward for the spoils was tax-free, plus the materials from the monster were very valuable. Therefore, the Lord was buying them at a slightly higher price, enough for the village to develop over the next few decades. When Len got home, his father praised him for doing a great job. But Len quickly explained that it was thanks to his father that he was able to defeat Chief Wolven. His father asked what he wanted as a reward. Len then pointed to the beautiful gem the old man was holding. In fact, he knew it was the Salacia pearl, an extremely rare treasure. Besides the gem, Len also pretended that the bracelet was among the treasure and asked to keep it so he could wear it publicly from now on, after receiving the reward. His father praised him again. Because he protected him and the entire village, peaceful life returned to the village, until one day Len came home, and he saw a strange girl. The girl was standing leaning against the brick wall. When she saw Len, the girl immediately asked, "Are you Len Ashton?" Len nodded in confirmation, even though he had never met her before. But for some reason, he had a feeling of familiarity. Len had no idea that this moment was destined to happen. A meeting he had always tried to avoid, the girl jumped down from the wall, looking pleased that she had found the right person. Then she drew out 2 small swords. The girl threw the remaining sword towards Len, and she asked if his wounds were all right. Len, flustered, put his sword down and replied that his wound had completely healed. He asked how she knew about him. But instead of answering, she simply said, "We should begin." Surprise! She charged straight forward with the sword in her hand. Len managed to block the attack just in time, but the girl didn't stop. Her punches came from a variety of different directions. However, she seemed quite pleased to see that Len was able to cope despite starting slower. Len helped her up while asking why they had to do this, secretly admiring her skills in his heart. However, she simply replied calmly, "The sword has been sharpened, don't worry." The two continued to duel with swords. The girl was always on the offensive while Len had to defend carefully. To avoid accidentally injuring either of them, Len decided to end the match. He unexpectedly changed tactics. He caught the girl off guard and pulled them both to the ground, with him lying on top of her. "Okay, you win," Len said breathlessly. But the girl suddenly panicked. The girl told him to move aside. Len quickly stepped back. When the girl stood up and said they should continue fighting, because she has never admitted defeat. But before they could even begin, the guards appeared and shouted, "Princess!" She was startled to see the Vios approaching. Finally, she set her sword aside and curtsied, and she presented a letter addressed to the Ashton family. She said she was there on behalf of her father. According to her, her father held the Ashton family in high regard for having defeated Chief Wolven. She introduced herself as Lisha Clausel, the Holy Maiden of White Light. Wait, did she just say Lisha Clausel? The guards beside her noisily complained about why she was traveling without an escort. The princess retorted, irritably, that they had wasted too much time returning. Len still couldn't believe it. The girl standing before him was the one he was supposed to eliminate in the game. Why is she here? The whole group returned to the Ashton mansion. This is where the princess finally met Len's father. Then, only Lisha and Len remained. Len was confused as he thought about this strange turn of events. In the game, Lisha Clausel, the White Light Saintess, never joined the protagonist's team. Even so, her power is still formidable, even surpassing the protagonist, if she doesn't put in the effort to level up. In terms of personality and qualities, she is also one of the most popular characters in the game. However, Lisha could not become a romantic object and was not called an unconquerable heroine. Back in the present, Lisha asks Len if he plans to visit the capital. She admitted that she came here purely out of curiosity, wanting to see firsthand the skills of the young man who had defeated Chief Wolven. Based on their recent fight, she confirmed that Len is not only strong but also very brave. She also expressed admiration for how quickly Len was able to adapt to swordsmanship, despite her sudden request for him to fight. In the end, Len could only sigh at this bizarre situation. He had heard from the captain of the guard that the village was located on Clausel's border, and it would take more than 10 days of horseback riding to reach the capital. Len thought that as long as he stayed hiding in this village, he would never meet the feudal lord's daughter. But she didn't expect Lisha to come all the way here, just to meet him for a duel. He frankly told her she had overestimated her skills. He pointed out that his father had defeated the monster before, so his victory over Chief Wolven wasn't entirely his own doing. Furthermore, Len also said that he didn't know any techniques, so he didn't believe he had the courage she thought he did. She scoffed, not believing a word he said. His continued humility only proved that Len was different from the other nobles. These are people who brag as if they've had the chance to kill a monster. That's why she wanted him to come back to the city with her, so they could duel anytime. Len realized that she really enjoyed swordsmanship after the recent match. He knew Lisha was a hard worker, but he still wanted to keep as much distance as possible, so he frankly told her that he had no intention of leaving the village. Upon hearing this, Lisha assumed that Len didn't like her, because he had tried his best to stay away from her all this time. Len replied that wasn't the reason, because if he left the village, his father would be the only one who could deal with the monster and everything else. If a monster like Chief Wolven appeared, the entire village would surely be wiped out. Moreover, he enjoyed life in the village and never considered living in the city. Lycia nodded and said nothing more, but inwardly she refused to give up and would wait for another opportunity. That evening, Lisha had dinner with the Ashton family. After the meal, Len went to the stables to check on the horses. When a sword fell at his feet, he knew exactly who it was and turned to ask Lycia if this sparring session was their post-meal exercise. Lisha was glad he'd received the message, which made her feel much better. Moreover, she had his parents' consent, so everything was fine. He was about to pick up the sword, but then decided against it. As if she could read his mind, Lisha threatened to extend his stay if he didn't pick up his sword. This made Len pretend to be happy as he picked up the sword, but seeing him do that only made Lycia more curious about why he was so adamantly rejecting her. There must be a good reason, right? Whatever the reason, Lisha decided she would defeat him to find out. Len replied, "What if I win?" But she simply said she would visit him again. Either way, it was a win-win situation for her. She rushed towards him. She swung her sword and struck. The wool is easily avoided. Lisha continued her attack with a series of slashes. However, she was surprised to see him easily parry the blows, even while he was in a defensive stance. Len ignored her question, and he asked why Lycia was so focused on defeating him. Lycia pointed out that she hates losing. She proudly calls herself Saintess of White, and she didn't like losing to boys her age. Len felt confused and asked her what being a saintess had to do with that. As the duel continued, she explained that it was precisely because she was a saintess that her skills were blessed with superior physical abilities and mastery of swordsmanship. Furthermore, she can also use secret magic. So with all these advantages, if she is defeated, she will feel very frustrated. Lisha started to get more serious and attacked Len. Compared to before, even Len noticed that she had become much faster and stronger. It must be the effect of the holy magic. If you remember the word for game correctly, holy magic is linked to the power of white magic, possessing healing abilities. Holy magic, on the other hand, has the power to counteract undead curses and detoxify. Len finally counterattacked, but Lisha easily dodged, attacking him repeatedly with a spinning move. Len could only defend himself as she continued to attack. This time, he asked why she didn't use all of her attacks. She replied that the Knight's Guard captain would be angry if she used it without permission. Len was now familiar with her movements, so when she lunged at him with her sword, he simply stepped aside and pointed his sword at her neck. He admitted she was very strong, but no match for Chief Wolven. He quickly tightened his grip on her arm, holding her back. Lisha was surprised. She tried to fight back. She quickly regained her balance and continued the attack. Len used her motivation again. To turn her around, he pushed her down and continued to point his sword at her neck. When Lisha was lying on the ground, Len ultimately won. This time, her eyes lit up because of what he had just done. But then she realized it and stepped back. She still refused to admit defeat. Until you hear applause, that's enough. The Knight's Guard captain applauded Len for his skill in defeating Lisha and her holy magic despite his young age. Now he understood why Len was able to defeat Chief Wolven alone. Besides being trained by his father, Roy, Len must have trained very hard to become so strong. The older man turned to the young girl. She must now realize Len's power. So that would be enough for her to return home, enthusiastically continuing her training. Lisha shyly admitted it, then moved closer to Len. She apologized for bothering him and thanked him at the same time. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the two men behind. Vios was the first to speak up, apologizing on behalf of Lisha and promising to speak well of Len and his family to the Count. He further explained that none of his subordinates could compare to Licia anymore, so she had become more complacent. However, he believed this experience would be a valuable lesson for the princess. If it were a Vios, he would prefer to extend his stay for a few more days so they could continue their sparring a bit more. However, despite his wishes, the old man told Len that they had to leave by tomorrow morning. In any case, it was Lisha who chose to go to the village and ask her father's permission to carry out certain tasks. This was the first time Len had heard of this, which surprised him a little. Vios went on to explain that Lisha was acting on behalf of the Count, trying to diffuse the unrest caused by the recent incident. Len knew Lisha was a person of outstanding character, but to actually represent her father at such a young age was truly impressive. Ultimately, he believed she was a good girl on the inside. Although she's a bit mischievous, but after all that, he still wondered how the story ended with him killing her in the game. Anyway, he couldn't possibly know because the storylines of the characters in the game haven't been explored. The next morning arrived quickly, and Lisha couldn't get a wink of sleep. She couldn't let things end like that, so she decided to write a letter to Len. After she finished, she let Vios read it first. She said she wanted to give him the letter before leaving to express her gratitude to the Ashton family. She thought it would be better to convey the invitation through a letter. However, the older man couldn't help but speak frankly. It was like a love letter. Licia was astonished. When the Vios points out parts of the letter, it's like the confession of a young girl deeply in love. He listed many more details that hinted at this, and even Licia had to admit it. She felt embarrassed by this realization. She decided to put the letter away and planned to throw it away as soon as they left the village. And so, Lisha and her troops left Ashton's house. She rode a horse. A sudden, strong gust of wind blew her letter away, something she didn't realize at the time. Meanwhile, Len returned to Tsurugi. Len tried to test Bandit's demon sword. He pointed his finger towards a bird flying nearby. Despite the considerable distance, he was still able to grab a feather, demonstrating the sword's skill. At that moment, he noticed two birds on a nearby branch fighting over a piece of paper. He decided to grab it right away. That's the letter Lisha wrote. And as Len glanced over, he merely frowned when he realized it was a love letter. Len continued reading the letter. He wondered who had invited him to Clausel. He noticed the letter was made of high-quality parchment, and he thought it might be a letter from Licia. But why here at this time? Just then, he heard the sound of horse hooves, and he saw a group of knights approaching, although they were not members of Clausel's group. Len quickly recognized their flag. The flag bore a different symbol than Clausel's. This means that this group of knights must have come from a different territory. They stopped and surrounded Len. They asked if he was one of the people under the rule of the Ashton family. Len replied that he was one of Ashton's men and asked who the knight was. Finally, the older man took off his helmet and explained that he was carrying a letter from Viscount Givens, addressed to the Ashton family. Len remembers this name. He knew that their territory lay northeast of where they were standing and had no connection to the Ashton family. However, since they were of a higher rank than the Count, Len had no choice but to lead them to his house. Soon after, that same night, this person met Len's father. Upon arriving and delivering the letter to him, the man immediately left, telling Len that he also had a letter for him from the Viscount, with an invitation for Len to join under his command. It seems that news of Len's victory over Chief Wolven reached the Viscount, who was very impressed with what Len had accomplished. Before they could respond, one of the Count's remaining knights stepped between them and told the Viscount's messenger that the Count had sent an invitation to Len. The Viscount's knights countered that a simple invitation from the Clausel family did not mean Len had accepted, so they saw no problem approaching Len. The Clausel family knight stood directly in front of them, indicating that the village belonged to the Clausel family. If the other knight wanted to speak to Len, he had to get past them first. As if to emphasize this point, the knight of the Colossal family implied that the Viscount should at least know the rules of etiquette. Regardless of faction or rank differences, a moment of tension ensued as everyone fell silent, holding their breath. Finally, the Viscount's knight relented, saying they would correct their mistake. Then they departed, while the knight of the Colossal family simply watched them go into the distance with a weary gaze. Back inside the house, Len's father read the letter, which listed the Viscount's reasons for including their village in his territory. Simply put, there are no factional disputes, even in this small, nameless village, something that Sir Clossel confirmed. The Liamel Empire was divided into 3 factions, led by the nobles. The first faction was the Imperial faction, deeply devoted to the Lion King, the founder of the nation. They believed that only the royal family could lead the country. Next is the Heroic faction, comprised of those who have produced heroes who have defeated the Demon King. They are led by 7 great noble families and are hailed as the main faction in the game, The Legend of the 7 Heroes. Viscount Givens also belonged to this faction. However, many believed that the power of the Imperial faction needed to be limited in order for the Liamel Empire to become more free and democratic. Additionally, they argued that the wealth gap needed to be reduced. Finally, the third faction was the Neutralist, comprised of peacemakers who disliked conflict, including Count Clossel. Returning to the present, Len asks Knight Clossel whether it is easy to annex a region into the territory of another noble. The knight replies that it is possible, provided both sides agree, although this is a very rare occurrence. The question was why they would want to seize a small, nameless village like theirs. The knight had a hunch that the Viscount might be plotting something behind the scenes. There must have been some motive behind this merger. After all, many hoped to draw the Clossel family into their fold. The Count was a distinguished nobleman, and the presence of the Saintess of White was of great importance. Len silently considered the fact that he didn't want to get involved in this trouble. However, because his family was connected to the Clossel family, he couldn't avoid it. If anything, they might have been drawn into an unimaginable mess. The Viscount's current objectives remain unclear, but there's nothing wrong with being cautious. While reading the letter, Len noticed something strange and called his father to pay attention. According to the letter, they wanted to annex the village and station knights there to compensate for the shortage of military forces. Were they really referring to Chief Wolven as a military shortfall? Len's father thought so too, but the incident was an isolated case and moreover, it was an anomaly. Aside from the Chief Wolven event, there was no record of the Ashton family lacking military strength. Len thought for a moment, and he recalled his conversation with Vios. The older man had told him that if there was damage from monsters in the territory, the Lord could be punished for repeatedly deploying insufficient forces. The young knight also supported this view, saying that it was the Lord's responsibility to protect his territory. Following this logic, Len concluded that if the land and neighboring villages suffered serious damage, then the Clossel family would likely be punished. He thought that might be Viscount Givens' target. Everyone was astonished by the Viscount's idea of using the situation to blame the Clossel family. Len thought that the Viscount might try to feign help to the accused Earl and then lure them into joining the hero's side. It seems the Viscount had been plotting this for a long time. The worst-case scenario is the Chief Wolven incident may have been orchestrated by Viscount Givens from the beginning. Len's father said that the suspicion might be far-fetched, but it was still a serious accusation. Len explained to his father that he might be overthinking things, as he currently had no evidence to prove his suspicions. However, if that were the case, everything would make sense. Len's father understood. Even Sir Clossel was surprised by Len's conclusion. Frankly, he said that the Count was also concerned about this possibility, and he praised Len's reasoning skills. The knights then decided to report everything to the Count. Everyone in the room advised each other to be more vigilant. Len couldn't help but worry about the possibility of facing the heroes he had fought alongside in the story, but there was nothing they could do at this point. And so, time passed, and winter has arrived. One fine day, Len and the Colossal Knights went hunting, grateful for their help in providing food for the winter. Nevertheless, the knights still hoped Len would consider moving to the capital to achieve greater success. However, Len replied as always that he had no intention of leaving the village, as he was the heir to the Ashton family. I went home in a cheerful mood. Len was surprised to see Lycia sitting comfortably and reading a book. She informed him that his mother had gone out with Mrs. Rigg. But all she got in return was from Len. Len asked her what she was doing there, and she bluntly replied that if he refused to come to the city, then she will come to see him. Lycia returned with some gifts. First, there was a shower head and a crystal that could produce water. With this tool, Len no longer needs to go to the river to fetch water. All the magical items she brought were powered by magic stones. However, Len worried that these items were very valuable. Lycia reassured him that they were old items she had repaired with her savings. Moreover, these gifts were merely a small apology for the incident with Viscount Givens. The Baron also wanted to object, but even that was difficult, especially when they were facing higher-ranking nobles. Although Lycia is the Saintess of White, that's all she can do. Those who held the title of Saintess were blessed by the god Elfin and are believed to have been reincarnated many times throughout history. However, they never defeated the Monster Lord or achieved the great feats of the 7 heroes. Lycia changed the subject, asking Len to take her to his father's room. Lycia used her divine magic to heal Len's father, and he appreciated the princess's efforts. As they left the elderly man's room, Len asked if she had received any treatment before coming here, and she replied that she had. Len had no idea about that, which surprised him quite a bit. They both continued their familiar training routine, and Len noticed her movements were sharper than before. Suddenly, Lycia lost her balance. But Len quickly caught her before she fell to the ground. It made her heart race. She immediately retreated, and she started complimenting him on his stamina. Len didn't have time to respond because she went on to talk about how much she enjoyed her training sessions with him. She suggested that they continue their duel the following morning. Lycia stayed at Ashton's house for a few more days. Make the most of your time to exercise as much as possible. Before she left, Len couldn't believe that Lycia had actually kept her promise to see him. However, Len knew that becoming too close to her wasn't a good idea. Because of what happened in the game, time flies by quickly. And the next significant event that affected Len's life occurred in the spring of his 11th year. By this time, his father had fully recovered and resumed hunting with him. They were on their way back when they discovered that Viscount Givens's cavalry is standing in front of their house. The same man from before, he greeted Len warmly. He extended another invitation to Len to join. The Viscount told them that this time it wasn't just an invitation, but a special offer for Len. He offered to sponsor Len's enrollment in a special class at the prestigious Royal Cadet Academy. Everyone was extremely surprised by this offer, especially since getting into the academy was difficult enough, and the fact that Len was able to become a member of the special class was even more impressive. The knight proudly stated that everyone knew the special class at the academy was an excellent place, because it only accepts heirs from 7 great heroic families and those of noble lineage. There are also some exceptional talents nurtured right in the imperial capital, who are also selected for this class. Since the Viscount is the Vice Minister of Justice, it would be easy for him to send a letter of recommendation to the academy. The knight turned to Len, asking if he wanted to develop his talent in the capital. But Len flatly refused. The knight couldn't believe his ears. Had he really refused this invitation? Len reiterated that he wanted to stay in the village. This angered the knight, and he loudly demanded to know why Len didn't want to become a nobleman. Len could have received the title as soon as he graduated. Len was firm in his decision because he knew the Royal Cadet Academy was an important setting in Legend of the 7 Heroes. The main character in the game is also a member of a special class. If Len joins the academy, it will lead him back into the game's timeline, and he will eventually kill Lycia. Len told the knight that he was content with his daily life in his village. Instead of continuing to argue with Len, the knight decided to discuss the matter with Len's father. This time, he asked the father if he wanted to make Len a nobleman. The father also thought that if his son could enroll in school in the imperial capital and learn about the world, it would be a good thing. However, he insisted that the final decision rested with Len. Furthermore, the father stated that he took pride in serving the Clausel family for generations. Therefore, he would write a reply to the Viscount's invitation so that the knight could take it back. The knight was taken completely by surprise. He said they would personally convey the reply to the Viscount, and the knight expressed his disappointment with Len and his father's choice. They left shortly afterwards, and a few days later, knights from the Clausel family hurried to Len's house. They brought along Licia, who was ill. Vios explained that the young lady had been ill 3 days prior, while they were in the middle of a visit to another village. According to him, she suffers from a strange disease that only affects children with high magical powers. Fortunately, the disease is not contagious, and once a child is infected, they develop immunity to it. The worrying aspect is that the disease has no warning signs and can strike at any time. If the young lady's immune system is weakened, the illness could lead to dangerous complications and even death. Therefore, she needs to rest for at least 2 to 3 weeks.